They tell you that at 76 you should be sitting on a porch, watching the fireflies, and feeling a sense of completion. But for me, the quiet is where the noise started. You see, I spent 30 years in the LDS system. I climbed every ladder they put in front of me. I wore the dark suits, I gave the motivational talks, and eventually I held the gavel as a mission president. I thought I was a fisher of men. But looking back at the ledgers, the quotas, and the faces of the boys I sent into the field, I realized I wasn't a shepherd. I was a regional manager for a corporation that deals in souls. If you have a son in the field, or if you're sitting there wondering why your decades of devotion left you feeling empty, stay with me. I'm not here to shout. I'm here to tell you what we were told to hide. When you are called as an LDS Mission President, it feels like the breath of God is on your shoulder. Your neighbors look at you differently. Your family is proud. You feel set apart. But the moment the doors of the mission home close, the spirituality starts to feel a lot like a sales meeting. I remember my first orientation. It wasn't about the New Testament. It was about key indicators. It was about the standard of excellence. I'm 76 now, and I'm finally realizing that the truth I was defending wasn't a spiritual one, it was a statistical one. And the cost of those statistics? It was the mental health of 19-year-olds and the life savings of good, honest people like you. I remember the day the call came. My wife and I felt a mix of terror and ecstasy. We sold our business, we left our home in Ohio, and we stepped into that mission field like soldiers. We believed the field was white already to harvest. But the harvest was different than the brochure. I started seeing the pressure from the area presidency. Every Tuesday the reports came in. If baptisms were down, it wasn't a lack of interest in the community. No, it was framed as a lack of faith in me or my missionaries. We were taught that if we were righteous enough, the numbers would move. It's a brilliant trap, isn't it? If the business fails, it's never the product's fault. It's always the salesman's soul. By the second month in the mission field, the baptism factory was in full production. I remember sitting in those leadership meetings, looking at a whiteboard covered in red and green markers. We didn't talk about how many people had found peace or a closer walk with God. We talked about total lessons, taught and commitments to follow up. It felt more like a car dealership than a church. I saw 19-year-old boys, good kids from places like Idaho and Utah, sobbing in my office because they hadn't found a golden contact that week. They felt like failures in the eyes of the Lord because the neighborhood was indifferent. And as their president, I was instructed to tell them to work harder, to wake up earlier, and to be more exact in their obedience. I was the one who had to enforce the office secrets, like the fact that we were quietly baptizing children without any real parental support just to meet the month's quota. We called them retention challenges later, but in the moment they were just ticks on a graph sent to Salt Lake City. I saw the mission funds being guarded like a corporate treasure while some of my missionaries were living in apartments with black mold and broken heaters. We were told to keep the expenses low to show good stewardship, but I realized too late that we were sacrifice testing these kids for a bottom line that didn't need their pennies. I spent my nights signing papers that I knew were half-truths, all to protect the image of the LDS mission machine. I was a man of God on the outside, but inside, I was becoming a man of the institution, and the weight of what I was hiding started to crush the very spirit I was supposed to be sharing. The turning point, the moment the cracks in the dam finally broke, came during my second year. A young missionary, barely 20, walked into my office. He didn't look like the bold witness of Christ the church posters depict. He looked like a ghost. He sat there and told me he couldn't do it anymore, not the work, but the lying. He had been told by his own leaders to tell a single mother that if she was baptized, her financial debts would miraculously disappear. He knew it was a lie, But he was told it was faith promoting. I looked at that boy and realized I was the one who had created the environment where that lie was acceptable. I didn't discipline the zone leaders. I was too afraid of what it would do to our baptismal numbers for the quarter. That was my catalyst. I chose the institution over the individual, and I've had to live with that ghost for a long time. When my 3 years were up and we returned to our quiet life, the shock was physical. I sat in our home chapel, and for the first time, I didn't see a congregation. I saw a system of unpaid labor. I saw my own grandsons getting their mission calls, and instead of joy, I felt a cold knot of dread. I began to look at the financial reports, the real ones, and the history we were never taught in the MTC. I realized that the LDS mission field isn't just about spreading a message. It's a rite of passage designed to bind the young to the organization through shared trauma and forced success. At 76, the hardest part of waking up isn't the truth itself. It's realizing how much of your life you spent building a wall that was meant to keep the truth out. I spent 40 years being wrong, and while I can't get that time back, I can at least spend my remaining years being honest. The regret of 30 years doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in during the quiet moments when you're looking at your bank statements and your family photos. I calculated it once: the tithing, the mission expenses, the missed birthdays, and the thousands of hours spent in windowless rooms, auditing the faithfulness of others. It's a staggering sum. But the money isn't what hurts. It's the realization that I sold a version of God that was small, litigious, and obsessed with obedience. I spent my best years as a high-level enforcer for a real estate empire that masks itself as a church. I was wrong about the LDS Church for 40 years because I wanted to believe I was part of something grander than myself. I traded my discernment for a title and a seat on the stand. Now, I look at the young men in their white shirts, and I don't see soldiers for Christ. I see victims of a multi-billion-dollar machine that needs their youth to maintain its momentum. So, here is my final warning to you, especially to the parents. Don't let them take your children's autonomy in exchange for a badge of honor. Don't let a corporation define what it means to be a good person. Your loyalty belongs to your family and your own conscience, not to a boardroom in Salt Lake City that doesn't even know your name. I'm 76, and for the first time in my life, I am truly free. It took me 30 years to find the exit, but the air out here is cleaner than I ever imagined. Don't wait as long as I did. Your life is too precious to be a footnote in someone else's financial report.